Successful Minds with Patricia Baronowski-Schneider, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Successful Minds with Patricia Baronowski-Schneider is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Patricia Baronowski-Schneider.
Hey, are you looking to scale your business from 5 figures to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to Successful Minds. I'm your host, Patty Baronowski-Schneider. Today I'm joined by Christian Banach, a growth expert, speaker, and digital marketing strategist. So welcome, Christian. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for having me on. My name, Christian Banach. I am the owner of a consulting firm that works with advertising and marketing agencies and other consulting firms to help them drive their growth.
That is a short and sweet answer, but it's definitely, it gets straight to the point. And that's something that most companies, need to be aware of, because everybody, always thinks that they're this company and they're the greatest in the world, but you need somebody, an outside person who's not, personally invested to help you really grow. I always say you're the greatest company in the whole world, and that's awesome, but it's not about you. It's about who you're servicing. So
Sure.
Good stuff. So now, can you provide a brief overview of the key points discussed in your recent webinar about transforming email newsletters from traditional announcements or to thought leadership tools?
Yeah, absolutely. We work, as I mentioned, with a lot of advertising and marketing agencies. And the problem that we see across most of these firms is that they've historically grown through more word of mouth and referrals, their networks. And while that has gotten them to a certain point, some to be very large agencies and consultancies, others, not so much. But at the end of the day, for most firms, they reach a certain point where they need to do something more proactively. Waiting for the phone to ring is no longer a growth strategy that is sustainable. So we have been working with agencies and consultancies to really kind of help them reimagine their email newsletters. We find that, roughly, half of companies have a newsletter. Now, they might have it, doesn't mean they're sending, emails with any sort of regular frequency, but they have one. And the other half, don't really have one. And, in many cases, they know that they should be doing something. But what we see is that most companies, their idea of a newsletter is what you might expect in terms of, we just won this new client. We just hired, this new executive. Our office party. Here's some photos from our recent retreat. And while that's all, fun and great information, at the end of the day, that's not going to be interesting to the prospects that you're trying to attract to your company. That's information that's more of an internal type of newsletter to keep everybody abreast of what's happening. So the notion of transforming these newsletters, it's taking it away from that more traditional company announcements and really focusing it more on thought leadership. And at the end of the day, when we're looking at newsletters, is can your newsletter help your target audience do their job better? And that's the lens that we really try to look at it, because if you can show up in somebody's inbox and, provide news or views, thought leadership content that will help them do that, you're going to start to be seen as an authority, in the marketplace. And that's where that newsletter, starts to become a new business asset to build awareness of your firm as well as being able to nurture prospects that may not be in the market for your services right now, but they might be in 3 months, 6 months, or somewhere down the road.
No, that's awesome. And it is funny that you mentioned that, because I do know a lot of companies that do that. They don't understand, I guess, the whole big picture of what the newsletter is about. If you want it, like you said, you can have an internal, document, and that's all great. But if you're trying to pose yourself as an expert out in the world, it's again not about you, but what's in it for whoever you're trying to reach. So, good stuff. Now, what are the main reasons behind agencies and consultancies reimagining their email newsletters?
Yeah, I think it boils down to, what I was saying a little bit earlier, is that the market, has gotten more competitive than ever. And waiting for that phone to ring is no longer going to cut it. The way buyers make purchasing decisions has fundamentally changed as well. Think back 15, 20 years ago, the internet wasn't as prevalent. So, where would you find out about an agency or consultancy? Yes, your network, word of mouth, those types of things were probably how. But these days, people can just jump online and they can start researching. So I'm sure most of the audience listening has heard, 70% maybe or more of the buyer journey has been completed before they even reach out to an agency. So because of that, you really need to rethink about how you're going to generate opportunities, for your company. And you need a way to build awareness of yourself. And you also then need a way that you can nurture those prospects, as I mentioned, because they're not always in market. So that's, I think, what's really driving, this need. And then the other factor is, if you're doing something on a more proactive level, maybe you're doing cold calling or cold email, going to events, any sort of these things, that has also become incredibly more challenging as well. From a cold calling standpoint, there's new technologies. I'm sure people can look on their phone and they'll see spam likely, or it'll send cold calls directly to your voicemail. Email boxes, it's harder to reach those now because they're spam blockers. So there's just all of these channels have gotten harder and harder to break through. So when you're doing more of this cold type of outreach, how do you make it less cold? So they do actually pick up your phone call, or they do respond to your email. And it's really about, again, building that awareness up. So that cold call, isn't really a cold call if somebody has been on your email newsletter for the last 6 months and you've shown up every week and provided really compelling thought leadership. So when you do reach out and you want to have a conversation with them about your services, they're going to be much more apt to take that call. So it really helps you, break through. So those, I think, are some of the more primary benefits of the newsletter. But there's a whole slew of other, things that one should be thinking about. The newsletter is a great way to, again, demonstrate your thought leadership. So you can build authority around a topic. Over time, they're going to see your content and your point of view on business challenges that are happening and news and trends. And you can influence their thinking based on the thought leadership that you share. What I also love about newsletters is that you own that database. When your social media is great, but you're on rented land there, and you're at the mercy of these different algorithms. And we've seen it with Facebook, how you used to get great organic reach on Facebook, and then that has plummeted. LinkedIn, you're still getting decent organic reach there now, but probably what's coming. They're going to want you to pay to play. But the email list is something that you own. You can guarantee that that person is going to receive that email at a certain day and a certain time that you send it. So that's also really a great benefit. Some others are monetization. We've seen some groups that are actually using the newsletter not just to generate leads and business, but they're actually selling advertising, in the newsletter. Right. So if you've built up a great audience, you can actually, offset the cost of producing this newsletter, or maybe even turn it into a profit center above and beyond any, business opportunities that you give. So, at the end of the day, the market is more competitive than ever. You really need to rethink and go to market on your behalf differently than what you used to before.
Right. Now, especially like since post-COVID, everybody remote. So even the physical networking opportunities aren't there as much, and people don't have the time or the patience. So everything's, what can I read? Just tell me real quick. So I think these are great advice. And what strategies do you recommend for creating a compelling thought leadership content that resonates with the target audience?
Yeah, that's a really great one, because, as I mentioned, you want this to be something that helps them do their job better. But how do you know what's going to help them, do their job better? So I think it starts with really understanding who is the audience of this newsletter. And that's a key factor to consider, because if you're an agency or consultancy that services a wide range of industries, that's something to think about. Like, is your newsletter then going to be focused on that particular industry? Well, if you service a lot, that might be a challenge. So maybe industry is not the right lens to think about it. Is it going to be more based on a persona? Maybe you work in digital marketing, so maybe it's less about the industry, like automotive or consumer packaged goods, and more about the actual persona, digital marketing tips. So you're going to really need to think through, first and foremost, is it based on industry, persona, or something else? But you really need to make sure that it's focused on one particular audience, or maybe you need multiple newsletters that are focused on different audience segments. But once you kind of narrow down who you ultimately want to speak to, I think one of the best ways to do this is to ask them. Reach out to clients that you have that are in that audience group, and find out what type of content are they reading right now. Where do they read it? What maybe is missing from the content that they want, and you can start to get a good picture of some opportunities. In addition, you could be doing a competitive audit and think about what are other newsletters or other news sources in general, podcasts, newspapers, magazines, whatever, that are targeting the same type of audience, and what type of content are they producing? What seems to be performing well for them that maybe you want to replicate, or what do you see maybe in what they're doing that doesn't really seem to make sense, and you're like, we probably shouldn't do that at all. So those are some really great ones. Once you've also built up a list, and you start, sending your newsletter out, we recommend doing surveys, periodically, and asking the audience, what do you like about our newsletter? What do you don't like? What do you wish it had? The great thing about newsletters as well is that every week, or whenever your frequency is, every time you send it out, you're going to see analytics. So what is the content that people are engaging with? What is the content that they're not? So there's all these different ways that you can start, to start to try to figure out what seems to be resonating, with your audience and what doesn't. But you're going to want to look at a variety of things. What are the type of topics? What type of content? What's the depth of that content? Is it long form, short form, bullets? So there's a lot of different variables that you have, but while you want to create kind of a template and have a similar format, you still want to be flexible, with that content, because it's going to evolve, over time, and even something that might be performing really well for you for a certain period of time, the audience may become fatigued, by that content, and you might need to switch it up. So it's you're constantly kind of iterating on it, but you got so much great access to information that you can, make these types of decisions very informed.
Yeah, no, I like how you express it, because it's not a one size fits all, and it's a lot of work. And that's where sometimes having an outside agency is beneficial, because I always tell everybody, stay in your lane. You do what you do. If you're running a company, that's great, but let somebody else who's dealing with the public, which is pretty much public relations marketing, let them help guide you, because it is a lot of work. I mean, and that's just coming up with the theme and format for the newsletter, so yeah, people need to understand this. It's not a one size fits all. So I guess now, how can agencies balance providing valuable thought leadership content with promotional messages without overwhelming the audience?
Yeah, while we advocate for having this thought leadership based newsletter, at the end of the day, the purpose at the end is to drive opportunities, build awareness, and ultimately lead to opportunities. So while it is thought leadership, it doesn't mean that you can never include something about yourself and be promotional in it. The rule of thumb that we try to advise our clients on is that 80% of the content should be valuable thought leadership based content. And, maybe 10 or 20%, it can be more self-promotional about yourself. And that seems to be a good balance, where if you look at engagement rates, Once you start going above the 20%, it becomes maybe a little bit too much about yourself and people start to disengage. But if you're in that 10 to 20% range, usually you don't see any drop off of engagement. And, that's usually enough to, put at least something into each edition of the newsletter about yourself.
Right. Yeah, just like with a book, when you open it up, right on the cover, it'll tell you just about the author, but it's not about them. It's just telling you who they are, and here's everything else. So I guess, like you said, if you won an award or something, you can throw that in there in the back, but don't make the whole newsletter about you, because it's not about you. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So now tell us, what common challenges did you highlight in the webinar that agencies face when reimagining their newsletters, and what solutions do you propose?
Looking to grow your business beyond 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures plus? What I want you to do is go download this book. The title is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. It will help you grow your business past 5, 6, and 7 figure. Go download the book today, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and download the book for absolutely free.
Yeah, there's a few stumbling blocks, I think, that that agencies and consultancies tend to face with their newsletter. 3 come to mind, and we can talk about each one of them. I think one is the list, and maybe they don't have any list, or the list is very small. Another one would be the content, that they may not have the resources to produce the content, or they don't believe they have the resources. And then third is maybe the discipline to manage and get this newsletter out. So in terms of the list, we can start there. So, number one is, I'm very surprised by, we do outreach to try to generate clients for ourselves in the newsletter space. And, we'll look on their website to see if they have a newsletter. I'll send an email, to them and say, hey, I noticed you did not have a newsletter. And I know that because I don't see any way to subscribe to their newsletter on their website. And you would be shocked at how many people come back and say, well, we do have a newsletter. Why do you think we don't? And I would explain, well, there's no way to sign up for it. And they're like, oh, and they don't even realize that there is no mechanism on their website to sign up to the newsletter. So first and foremost, on the most basic level, if you're going to have a newsletter, make sure you have a way to people to subscribe to it in the first place, and make it, don't bury it and hide it, on some obscure page of your website. There needs to be multiple places to subscribe to it. So that's kind of, the lowest hanging fruit of all of it. But then the other area that I think sometimes people are, have misperception about, is that you can build your own newsletter subscriber list by using tools like a ZoomInfo or Apollo. So once you've kind of narrowed down who your target audience is, you can use a tool like that which is essentially a database that you can leverage, and you can, send your newsletter to that. And so some people believe, like, well, that they think that is illegal of some sort, or against canned spam type of laws. And there are some email service providers that don't like you to use non-opted in emails. However, there's nothing illegal about it. That just might be the terms of service of that particular email newsletter. But in terms of canned spam, there's nothing against the rules there, as long as you're following some of the basics of having your address there, an unsubscribe list, things like that. Like, you can absolutely send an email, a newsletter type email to a purchase type of list that you have. Now, that said, you want to make sure you're not getting spam complaints and that sort of thing. And again, in our experience, if you're sending that traditional newsletter that is all about you, and you just blindly send it to people that don't know who you are, they're going to unsubscribe and they're going to complain. But if you send them something that helps them do their job better, you would be shocked at how little number of complaints that you're going to receive. In fact, we get clients or prospects all the time that email us and say, I'm not sure how I got on your newsletter, but this is fantastic. Thank you. So that's the type of response you get, provided that the content, is valuable, to the audience. So I think the list should not be a stumbling block. If you either, start to actually allow people to subscribe, and you leverage some of the ability, some of these different tools to build up a list for yourself. In terms of the content, there's again, most in this professional services world, you're serving clients, it's the cobbler's kids have no shoes. You do a great job of creating content perhaps for your clients, but you don't do anything for yourself. And that's, unfortunately kind of inevitable. However, I think with the newsletter in particular, we think about it in a couple different ways. There's original content, there is curated content, and then there's repurposed content. So original content, yeah, that's original thought leadership that, is created by your subject matter experts. So that's a little bit of a bigger lift. But, again, if you spread this out and you have a content calendar and you really treat this like you would yourself, like a real client, you'd be surprised at what you can, produce. But, sometimes you might benefit from working with a firm like ours that can kind of help, guide that process and make sure that there's some accountability behind it. Or, there are outside resources that, you can, leverage to, help create some or ghostwrite some of the content as well. So there are some options, from the original standpoint. But that said, you don't have to necessarily have a newsletter that's all original type of content. We've seen a lot of great newsletters that use curated content. So they're just really out there scouring, the news to find really relevant and interesting things that, same thing, will help the target audience do their job better. But it's not necessarily original. It's just, curating that content. So you could sort of imagine, somebody, a busy executive who might be subscribed to 20, 30 different newsletters. They don't have time to read all of those. If they could come to one spot every week at the same time that brings all the best news together, you become now a really valuable resource. And that's a much easier lift to do to, aggregate, content. So that's something to consider. There's also repurposing content. In many cases, when we start working with clients, they have content, whether it's in case studies, capabilities, decks, other thought leadership they've done before, and just repurposing that for a newsletter standpoint can often, get you a lot more content that you're even thinking about. And there's just a lot of other kind of creative ways to do this as well. One of our things that we really enjoy is interviews, and there's sort of a two reasons for this. So you can think about doing an interview series of whomever your target audience is that you want to work with. And you could reach out to them and offer them the opportunity to be interviewed, and you'll take that interview and put it in your newsletter. So it serves two purposes. Number one, it's interesting content that people want to read, their peers on, could be certain trends or things that they're experiencing. So the content in the newsletter is very compelling. The second thing is it's an opportunity for you now to meet and talk to one of your potential prospects. So you can start to build a relationship with them. And it's a way to, start that relationship without making it all about a sale, that we want to pitch you our product. You actually can start to talk to someone. Now you want to be careful. You don't want to turn it into a sales pitch, but if you do it the right way, just naturally, once you start to develop a relationship, opportunities tend to come from that. Right. So there's a lot of ways to think about the content. It's not necessarily sitting down and writing a 3,000 word blog post about some sort of topic. There's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. So that's the second one. And then the third one, like I said, it's the discipline, of getting it out there. And, if you're doing it, managing it in-house, you got to treat yourself, like I mentioned earlier, as a client. You have to have an editorial, calendar. You have to have a frequency of meetings. Set the newsletter to go out at a certain time and a certain day with whatever frequency it is, and just hold yourself to that. And, if you're still struggling with that, then again, working with firms like ourselves, we can kind of help add some accountability to that process, and, even take some of the heavy lifting, off to make sure that, the newsletter is getting published at the frequency that you like.
No, all great stuff. And I like how, how it's the variety, having potential clients on there. I think that's a great idea, and repurposing information. And I do the same kind of, because I don't have time to read 50,000 news things. So if everything is in one spot, well, now I'm subscribing because you're saving me the legwork, and I'm learning something. And if you incorporate a little bit of everything in there, it's like perfect. Nice. I guess tell us, what metrics should agencies focus on to measure the success of their reimagined email newsletters?
Yeah, so the metrics are important, right? We're not just doing this to do this. There needs to be a reason behind it. So when we think about metrics, there's really kind of four buckets. One would be engagement, one would be growth, the third would be monetization, the fourth is feedback. And so engagement is what people probably typically think about: open rates, click rates, reply rates, things like that. And those are all important that you're going to want to, monitor every time that you do a send. And there's, benchmarks that, you can look at to see how you're performing. And, the goal would be to continually try to improve that, week over week. So that's one. The second would be growth. And by growth, I mean the list. Are you growing subscribers? So part of that is making sure that there's a way to opt in on your website and tweaking that. And they're, LinkedIn, for example, they have a really cool feature now where you can actually do something on your profile. So when people see your name, you could subscribe to the newsletter right there. So there's a lot of other channels that you can be thinking about. If you're doing public speaking, asking people to subscribe to the newsletter. I'll probably do that at the end of this podcast. So, thinking about how you're going to get some of that organic growth. Also, if you have really great content, people are going to forward that newsletter to their colleagues and say, hey, you got to check this out. So having really great content will help, with the growth as well. And then, if you are building a list, as I described for some of those other tools, keeping tabs of, how often are you building that? What is the engagement levels of that? Some things along those lines. So growth is another one. Monetization. There is sort of the direct monetization that can happen. So are you getting people that are responding to your newsletter and saying, hey, we want to meet and talk about your services? That will happen. Then there's more of the indirect route where maybe, they're on your newsletter, but you are doing like a cold call or a cold email to them. And you get a meeting and then a project comes out of it, but they only took that meeting because they know you from the newsletter. Right. So you're going to want to kind of keep track of that to see, is there an ROI coming, from it? And then, there could be other monetization. I mean, we have, we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, people placing ads from advertisers in the newsletter, and can that offset some of the costs? Mm-hmm. Something that we're, going to be playing around with on our side is having another edition of our newsletter, but it's a paid version that you need to subscribe to. And there are, in our case, going to be more new business leads that we're going to provide and deeper content. So that could also be another area that you can explore. So monetization, and then feedback, which is, could be more, it could be quantitative or qualitative. You can look at, as I mentioned, surveys. You could do that, something that's sent periodically, to your subscribers. I know some newsletters will put at the bottom, kind of like, a smiley face, a neutral face, and then a sad face, and you can click on the button and see what people think about those newsletters on a weekly basis. So there's some quantitative numbers you can pull, and then also qualitative. People will respond. Again, if you have a great newsletter, people will respond and give you feedback on it. I love, those types of responses, when on our newsletter, for example, I write a little motivational type story, something usually pretty personal that I've been dealing with. And, sometimes I'll get emails back, every week from people that the story resonated with them. They went through something else, similarly. So, the feedback that you get on kind of some of these responses, if you've done a good job of trying to create a personal connection with your audience, which is key. That's another thing when you think about the company newsletter versus more of this kind of thought leadership newsletter. You want there to be some personality, into the newsletter as well. It should feel like it's coming from a person or people within the organization, not the organization itself.
Right. That's why I think it's great that you put something personal in there, because it makes you a real person. And even with, follow up, like if you send an email and an email bounces, you would follow up and say, okay, where did this person go? Who replaced them? Blah, blah, blah. So if someone was subscribing and unsubscribed, and then you can send a little personal note and say, no pressure. I'm glad that you did subscribe, but was there something about it that you didn't like? Would you like to see something different? You could kind of do your little survey there too. So yeah, lots of ways around it. It all requires work, but yes. Now tell us, what future trends in email marketing and thought leadership did you discuss in the webinar that agencies should be aware of?
Yeah, future trends. I think this all kind of ladders up maybe to a little bit of a bigger picture, in that, we are seeing more and more and recommending clients, think of themselves more as a brand publisher, and a media entity, essentially. We've seen situations like, or companies like Red Bull, for example. I tell a story, when I had my first business, I had a meeting at Red Bull to talk about sponsorships of some of the concerts that we were producing at the time. And I mentioned something about Red Bull being an energy drink company, and they corrected me. And they're like, no, we're not an energy drink company. We are a media company that happens to sell Red Bull. And it was the first time that I had, come across that. But, you look at what Red Bull does today. I mean, they are, they have magazines, they have DJ academies, they are, having people jump out of spaceships, in outer space. And they really do. They think about themselves as a brand that's publishing content, first and foremost. And then they have these, in their case, energy drinks is the product that they sell. And I think more and more companies are starting to take a similar type of mindset and producing, whether it be documentary films or, podcasts. I mean, there's so many just variety of different media formats that, brands are coming to, but it's a way to make that connection between your target audience and your brand. And I think agencies are maybe a little bit slower to the party here. But, the email newsletter, is one that we've found to be, jumping out of planes, and, documentary films might be a much bigger lift, but the newsletter is a really great way to demonstrate your expertise, at a much more cost-effective, way than some of the other ones that we talked about. So I think we're going to see more and more, of that as we go forward. Right. So that's one. I would think another trend that we're seeing, which we're seeing everywhere, is AI. And AI has actually enabled, newsletters. I think to be, it's not. I've seen newsletters now that they have built AI to scrape the web. I talked about the curation. The AI is doing the curation, for them. Nice. And there's a pretty popular newsletter that's out there right now that's growing exponentially that has like 19 different versions of it. And it's really the engine behind it is AI. There's still humans that are, kind of working with the AI, but that wasn't possible a couple of years ago. So how AI kind of impacts newsletters, and, conversely, the other side of thing is, will things become maybe oversaturated now because it's not going to be as challenging maybe to create content, and will there be too much content? So so there's maybe a dark side, to the AI, part of it as well. And I would say the third thing that I'm seeing more and more of is the emergence of more niche, however you say it, newsletters. And, and I think maybe that has to go with kind of what some of the things that we were saying earlier, but, really focused very precisely on maybe a specific industry or specific job, or, some other, sliver of the market. Because, the cost of having maybe a magazine or something for such a small niche probably didn't make sense economically. But the newsletters and how the cost has come down on it, you can still, have a really great, compelling newsletter. Maybe your audience is only a couple thousand, subscribers. But if it really speaks to them, it could still be really a great asset for yourself, whether you're monetizing it, because you're an agency and you're trying to generate leads, or even if you're selling advertising space to it. So the economics have changed over the last couple of years, where some of these niche type newsletters, really could make sense. And even subscribers of these newsletters, because there is so much information overload, they don't want to go to 30 different resources. They really want to zero in on just the one thing that maybe makes most sense for them. So I think that's going to continue, I think, over time.
Right. Wow. All great stuff. And I think a lot of companies, like you said, they don't all do newsletters, and now hopefully after they watch this, they'll understand the value in doing one and why they should, and getting help from an outside person to do it. So awesome stuff. But anything else you want to talk about? Any more of the podcast or anything, or the webinar, or anything we didn't touch on?
Yeah, no, I would just say, if you're, listening to this or watching this and thinking about, whether a newsletter, is right for you, or, you can get more out of your newsletter. I mean, I think this has been the biggest, if you will, growth hack for our company. How we even got into this, was sort of by accident. When I started the company, I was working somewhere else. I couldn't really market my services. So what I ended up doing is I created this newsletter. And since I couldn't market my services, I just wanted to provide value. And I was just hoping I would pay it forward. And when I launched my company officially, somebody would come to me. And it really took off, right out of the gates, and to the point where I'm like, I don't ever really want to make it a sales, channel. I want to continue to provide value because I don't need to make it into sales. People are coming to me because of the thought leadership that I'm providing in the newsletter. And then what ended up happening here is we started getting prospects coming to us saying, we love your newsletter. Can you do it for us? And initially it was like, well, no, we don't do that. We do this service and that service. And the light bulb just went on that, we're at a moment in time here that this is really seeing a resurgence. And it's not just, my company that's seeing it. Newsletters have really come, back strong. There's The Hustle was bought by HubSpot. There's countless other examples. Industry Dive was purchased. So there's a lot of newsletter activity happening, even on like the private equity and venture capital type of side of things. So I really, what might seem old, that, why are we talking about newsletters in 2024 when that was maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s? But, there's been like the pendulum has like shifted back the other way. So I do encourage you to really, as a listener, think about, how you might be able to use this as a tool for your firm.
Nice. And how are people subscribing to your newsletter?
Yeah, so no surprise, we do have a newsletter. So our website, you can go to it, christianbanach.com. And there's multiple ways that you can subscribe to the newsletter from our website. And it's sent out every week, and you can get all the information you need, about me and about our company and our services, on our website and through the newsletter.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Christian Banach. So thanks for listening to Successful Minds with Patty B. Never miss an episode by subscribing. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best and grow, scale, and win.
Thank you for listening to Successful Minds with your host, Patricia Baronowski-Schneider. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear God, it's beautiful.